Speaking about the Halakha does not stop at the boundaries of the Torah as most people know it. Rather, it extends to reveal an intertwined system of texts, traditions, and commentaries that have accumulated over many long centuries. Between the 5 books attributed to Moses, the Mishnah, and the Talmud, and later the great codifications such as the Mishneh Torah, we discover that Jewish law is not a single book. Instead, it resembles a complex network of texts, laws, and interpretive efforts. What makes this even more intriguing is that this system cannot be separated from history and reality. From the story of the discovery of the Book of the Law during the reign of King Josiah to the role of Ezra in reviving the sacred texts after the Babylonian exile, and finally to the Septuagint translation that carried the Torah into the Greek world, we find that every stage carries both a religious and a political dimension at the same time. On the other hand, across the ages, contradictory narratives and controversial claims have also emerged. Among them are the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which transformed into more of an ideological weapon than a genuine religious document. In this video, we will dive together into the layers of Halakha, from the 5 books all the way to contemporary legal rulings. We will also explain how this body of law was born from the womb of history, debate, and human interpretation. So stay with us until the end. And do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can receive all our new content. When we speak about the Torah, we are dealing with a Hebrew term that means law or divine legislation. It represents the essence of the Jewish faith and the foundation of its religious structure. Usually, it refers to the first 5 books traditionally attributed to the prophet Moses, peace be upon him: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. This concept later entered Greek culture under the name Pentateuch, meaning the 5 books. However, the Torah did not remain confined to being merely a written text. Over the centuries, it gradually transformed into a central source for interpretations, explanations, and legal deliberations that enriched it and allowed it to remain continually renewed. As for the Halakha, it cannot be reduced to a single book. Rather, it represents a living legal and social system. In Hebrew, the word Halakha literally means the path or the way, referring to the manner in which a Jew is expected to conduct his daily life. This system includes laws, legal rulings, and customary practices that regulate worship, religious rituals, family relations, and economic and judicial dealings. Its sources are arranged in a sequence that begins with the written Torah, followed by the oral Torah, which was later compiled in the Mishnah and the Talmud. After that came the major codifications such as Mishneh Torah by Maimonides, the Arba'a Turim, the 4 Rows, and the Shulchan Aruch. Finally, there are the later legal opinions and local customs, known as minhag, which granted the law a degree of flexibility and the ability to adapt to the changing times and societies. The 5 books form the central pillar of the Jewish religion, and they are the primary reference upon which the Halakha relies. Each of these books contributes to forming a comprehensive picture of the relationship between God and the children of Israel, as well as the formation of the community and its religious identity. The book of Genesis begins with the story of creation, then moves on to the events of Adam and Eve and the early prophets, eventually reaching the stories of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. It is the book of beginnings, presenting the origin of the universe, humanity, and the Israelite family. After it comes the book of Exodus, which focuses on the story of slavery in Egypt and liberation under the leadership of Moses, along with the covenant established at Mount Sinai. It also recounts the receiving of the 10 Commandments, making it both the book of liberation and legislation at the same time. Then comes the book of Leviticus, which is concerned primarily with rituals and priesthood, as well as laws of purity, offerings, and the organization of the work of the priests descended from Aaron. In doing so, it reflects the ritual and ceremonial dimension of the divine law. In the book of Numbers, we find a narrative of the journey of the children of Israel through the wilderness, accompanied by the organization of the community, population censuses, and the mention of rebellion and wandering. It is therefore the book of collective testing. Finally, the book of Deuteronomy appears in the form of farewell speeches delivered by Moses, in which he restates the law before the people enter the promised land. The book concludes with the account of his death, making it the book of remembrance and reaffirmation of the covenant and the law. After the 5 books, the Jewish sacred text expanded to include what is known as the Tanakh, meaning the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. This expansion reflects a continuous development in the religious and textual identity of Judaism. The historical books record the journey of the children of Israel after the death of Moses, passing through the conquest of the land, the era of the judges and the kings, then the Babylonian exile, and finally, the return to rebuild the temple. In this sense, they represent a collective memory carrying both political and religious dimensions. As for the books of the prophets, they contain prophecies, warnings, and visions of the future, in addition to moral messages calling for repentance and reform, linking the fate of the nation to its relationship with God. Meanwhile, the writings include the Psalms, Proverbs, the Book of Job, and other texts that carry spiritual and philosophical dimensions. Here, a debate emerges regarding differences in the canon. The Hebrew text recognized 24 Jewish books distributed among the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, while the Greek Septuagint translation added other books, bringing the total number to 66. Christian churches later adopted this variation. The Catholic and Orthodox churches accepted the additional books, whereas Protestants limited themselves to the Hebrew text. Meanwhile, the Samaritan tradition restricted itself to the 5 books alone, with some textual differences. This plurality does not necessarily reflect deliberate distortion, as much as it illustrates the paths of transmission, translation, and editorial work across the centuries. It also serves as evidence that the Torah and the Halakha were not rigid texts, but living texts, capable of interpretation and adaptation over time, something that granted them the ability to endure and spread across multiple cultures. When speaking about the Halakha, it is impossible to overlook the pivotal historical moments that left a deep impact on the formation of Jewish texts and their authority. The story begins with the Ark of the Covenant, which was associated with the symbol of the presence of the law in the First Temple during the time of Solomon. However, political upheavals and the division between the kingdoms of Israel and Judah paved the way for the Babylonian exile and the destruction of Jerusalem. In this troubled context emerges the figure of King Josiah. Religious accounts indicate that the priest Hilkiah discovered in the house of the Lord what came to be known as the Book of the Law. The scribe Shaphan then read it before the king, and the impact of the text was profound. It is said that Josiah tore his garments as an expression of grief and shock, after which he launched a comprehensive reform campaign that significantly changed religious practices. From an academic perspective, this event may not have been the discovery of an entirely new text, as much as it was a moment of collecting and editing texts that had accumulated over time. In this sense, the Book of the Law became a reflection of a movement of religious and political reform. Centuries later, when some of the Jews returned from the Babylonian exile under Persian rule, the name Ezra, the scribe, became closely associated with the Second Temple. He gathered the people before the water gate and read to them what he called the Law of Moses, in a foundational event that established new pillars for religious life. Researchers believe that Ezra did not present a new revelation, but rather revived the institution of the text and granted it collective authority through public reading and shared rituals. As a result, the text became the center of communal unity and a renewed collective memory. The third important stage is represented by the Septuagint translation, which was produced in Alexandria in the 3rd century BCE, when Jewish scholars were asked to translate the 5 books into Greek. This translation was not merely a linguistic transfer. Rather, it established a new textual trajectory through which the scripture entered the Mediterranean world and became part of Hellenistic culture. This development explains the differences in numbering and terminology between later Jewish traditions and the emerging Christian traditions. If the milestones of Josiah, Ezra, and the Septuagint shaped the features of the written Torah, then the other face of the law manifested itself in what came to be known as the oral Torah. Beginning in the 1st century BCE, the movement of the Pharisees emerged. They believed that alongside the written Torah, there existed a parallel law that had been given at the same time, yet it was transmitted across generations through oral teaching rather than written text. Through this understanding, this tradition began to play a major role in enriching and expanding religious jurisprudence. As sayings, interpretations, and legal deliberations continued to grow in number, the need arose to organize and preserve them from being lost. In response to this need, Rabbi Judah the Prince, Yehuda Hanasi, around the year 200 CE, undertook the task of compiling them in a comprehensive work known as the Mishnah. He divided it into 6 major orders, covering both religious life and civil matters. Through this process of codification, the oral heritage was transformed into a text standing on its own, and it became the foundation for further development in Jewish legal thought. Yet the Mishnah was only the beginning. After it came the Talmud, which combined the text of the Mishnah with a vast layer of explanatory discussions known as the Gemara. 2 major versions of the Talmud emerged: the Jerusalem Talmud, compiled in Palestine, and the Babylonian Talmud, compiled in Babylonia. The latter eventually became the more influential and widely accepted authority. The Talmud is not a closed book of rigid rulings. Rather, it resembles an open encyclopedia of debates, discussions, and legal arguments that reveal the vitality of Jewish interpretive reasoning and the ways in which scholars interacted with sacred texts. Through it, foundational principles of Halakha were crystallized. Among these principles is the rule, Lo Bashamayim Hai, meaning, it is not in heaven. This principle affirmed that the law is not determined by heavenly intervention, but by human deliberation, discussion, and legal reasoning. Another important principle is Pikuach Nefesh, which holds that the preservation of human life takes precedence over most religious commandments. Because of this principle, saving a life overrides even the sanctity of the Sabbath, except in very limited cases. As time passed and the scope of Talmudic discussions expanded, accompanied by an ever-growing body of commentaries, reaching a clear legal ruling became increasingly difficult for those who were not specialists. As a result, the need emerged for major legal compilations that would simplify the law and make it clearer and easier to apply. In the 12th century, the philosopher and Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, known in the West as Maimonides, produced his famous work, Mishneh Torah. This work represented a comprehensive attempt to gather all the branches of Jewish law into an organized structure written in a clear and systematic style, free from lengthy debates and marginal discussions. Because of this approach, it became a practical guide for both judges and ordinary believers. In the 14th century, Jacob ben Asher authored the book Arba'at Turim, the 4 Rows. In this work, he organized Jewish law into 4 main sections covering the areas of worship, economic dealings, personal status and family law, and judicial matters. This structure later became the standard framework for many subsequent legal works. Then, in the 16th century, Joseph Caro produced his famous book Shulchan Aruch, the Set Table, which is considered the most important reference for the practical application of Halakha up to the present day. In order to enrich this work and incorporate the customs of the Ashkenazi communities, the Rabbi Moses Isserles, commonly known by the acronym REMA, added his well-known glosses to the text. Through this collaboration, the Shulchan Aruch became a comprehensive legal reference that brought together both Sephardic and Ashkenazi traditions within a single authoritative framework. Halakha was not built solely upon rigid texts. Rather, it relied on several legislative tools that allowed it to adapt to changing realities. Among the most prominent of these tools is what is known as minhag, meaning the local custom. Such a custom can transform into a binding rule in cases where there is no explicit textual ruling or where scholarly opinions conflict. One of the figures who gave particular importance to this dimension was the Rabbi Moses Isserles, the Rema. In his commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, he considered the popular practices of Jewish communities in Eastern Europe to possess normative value in legal decision-making. This illustrates that Halakha did not operate in a vacuum. Rather, it consistently responded to the spirit of society. In many ways, this resembles what is known in Islamic intellectual tradition as fiqh al-waqi, the jurisprudence of reality. Another highly significant tool is the principle known as Dina de Malchuta Dina, meaning the law of the state is the law. According to this principle, Jews are obligated to comply with the civil laws of the country in which they live, particularly in matters related to taxation, property, and commerce, so long as those laws do not contradict the fundamental principles of the Torah. This rule reflects the flexibility of Jewish law and its capacity to coexist with diverse political systems, ranging from Islamic states in the medieval period to modern European legal systems. In addition to this, there appeared what are known as takanot, reformist enactments or protective measures established by rabbis in order to safeguard the community from deviation or to close legal loopholes. Some of these regulations were related to protecting family purity, while others were concerned with organizing commerce and social relations. This bears a clear resemblance to concepts in Islamic jurisprudence such as blocking the means, sad al-dara'i, or consideration of public interest, al-masalih al-mursala. Yet perhaps the most notable legal innovation was the prosbul, which is attributed to Rabbi Hillel. Through this mechanism, he addressed the problem created by the sabbatical year, during which debts were supposed to be cancelled every 7 years. Hillel introduced a legal document that transferred the debt from a private individual to the authority of the court. In this way, the obligation to repay the debt remained in effect. As a result, the poor could continue to obtain loans without lenders fearing that their rights would be lost. Halakha is not limited to theoretical rulings. Rather, it lives within the details of the daily life of a Jewish individual through prayer, fasting, festivals, and matters of personal status. The Jewish day is divided into 3 primary prayers: Shacharit in the morning, Mincha in the afternoon, and Ma'ariv in the evening. During these rituals, the worshipper wears the prayer shawl known as the talit and covers the head with the kippah, while passages from the Torah are recited. In this way, prayer becomes a moment of identity and belonging in which the presence before God is renewed. Fasting and religious festivals also represent foundational moments in shaping collective memory. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is considered the most important religious occasion. It is a fast that lasts for more than 24 hours, though the sick and pregnant women are exempt from it in accordance with the principle of pikuach nefesh, which prioritizes the preservation of life. Meanwhile, the festival of Passover commemorates the memory of the Exodus from Egypt, while the festival of booths, Sukkot, recalls the period of wandering in the desert. Through these commemorations, religious festivals become bridges between history and faith, continually reproducing communal identity across generations. With regard to personal status, marriage is regarded as a religious duty within the community, and refraining from it has traditionally been viewed as a violation of the commandments of the Torah. Polygamy remained permissible in earlier periods. However, among Ashkenazi Jews, it was restricted beginning in the 11th century through a ruling attributed to Rabbeinu Gershom, while it continued for a longer period among Sephardic communities before eventually being abolished altogether with the rise of modern civil legal systems. With the entry of modern Jewish societies into an era filled with new challenges, Halakha continued its process of legal reasoning and offered approaches that reflect its flexibility. Among the most notable of these issues is the question of electricity on the Sabbath. A long debate emerged regarding whether pressing an electrical switch should be considered equivalent to kindling a fire or to completing an electrical circuit, both of which could fall under prohibited activities. As a result of these discussions, practical solutions appeared, such as the use of timers and specially designed Sabbath lamps, which allow certain functions to operate without directly violating the restrictions of the Sabbath. In the field of medicine, complex ethical questions also arose. One of the most debated issues concerns the determination of the moment of legal death, whether it should be defined by the cessation of brain activity or by the stopping of breathing. This question is closely linked to the permissibility of organ donation. Modern medical technologies such as artificial insemination and various forms of fertility treatment have also sparked debate regarding lineage and the definition of legitimate motherhood. Despite these complexities, the governing principle has remained the rule of pikuach nefesh, which prioritizes the preservation of human life above almost any other legal ruling. In the economic sphere, the principle of dina de malchuta dina, the law of the state is the law, has continued to play an important role in reconciling religious law with modern civil legislation concerning taxation, contracts, and property rights. Through this principle, Halakha has been able to maintain a presence within the framework of the modern state without losing its flexibility or its relevance. In conclusion, it becomes clear that Jewish texts and the system of Halakha have never been rigid or static rulings. Rather, they are the result of a long historical process of compilation, interpretation, and transformation. From the Torah and the Septuagint to the Mishnah and the Talmud, and all the way to the challenges of the modern era and contemporary questions in medicine and law, the development of Jewish law reflects a dynamic intellectual tradition. What is sometimes promoted as hidden secrets or contradictions is, in reality, nothing more than a reflection of a complex history in which religious, political, and social elements intertwined in shaping Jewish identity and collective memory across centuries. And here we arrive at the end of the video. Do not miss the opportunity to follow more content by subscribing to the channel and activating the notification bell. See you in another documentary.